keeping slides very quickly. Here at the Evolutionary Astrology Network, you can listen to our free weekly audio podcasts that are posted on our website every week. You go to our homepage, you see the forecasting menu, and there's a drop down to our audio podcasts. We also have 3 sections of an astral library that you can subscribe to, and we have 3 segments to our multimedia course. Here's a little bit more information on our astral library and the 3 sections that we have. You can see the titles of each section and the number of titles we have of materials within each section along with its hours. You can subscribe to any one of these sections. $29 a month recurring, $29 1 month, $69 6 months, $109 12 months, and down at the bottom you can see where you can subscribe to all 3 sections of the astral library as well. Here's our multimedia course and the 3 segments that we offer, and at the lower part of the screen you can see the materials that's included with our segments. Segment 1 and 2 both have free monthly webinar classes that you can participate live every month or find the recordings in our students area of the website. If you're new and interested in an actual class from segment 1 or 2, just send us an email and we'd be happy to give you an actual sample of our classes. So again, here is tonight's subject matter, and here are the 2 dates that are most important. They're a little bit different than what I've been saying on the podcast for the last month or so. I didn't realize I was using the mean nodes when I had my dates, and so I'm looking through things as I'm prepping over the weekend here, and I'm going, different dates. Here's the actual dates and degrees. On January 15th of next month, Pluto at 1339 Capricorn will make a square to the North Node at 1339 Libra, and then of course the South Node at 1339 Aries. And then on January 20th of 2015, Uranus will conjunct the South Node at 12 degrees Aries 56 minutes, and it is opposing the North Node, which will be at 12 Libra 56 minutes. And I thought I would also include the listing of the Uranus-Pluto squares. Depending on where you were on planet Earth, Uranus was making the 6 out of 7 squares to Pluto either last night, late December 14th, or early this morning on December 15th. Uranus at 12 degrees Aries, 35 minutes retrograde. It's going to be going direct here at 12:34 on the winter solstice, December 20th. And of course then Pluto in Cap, 12:35 Capricorn. And as you can see, the 7th and final waxing square is coming along just 3 months later, March 16th. And so it can feel like this Uranus-Pluto square is not going to let up over the next 3 months. And as a matter of fact, they will remain within orb of that waxing square for several years to come following 2015. I thought I'd move us right into some of the key things that we will be looking at as we have this Uranus-Pluto square interact with the nodal axis. In a nutshell, we're going to be looking at liberating the soul, Pluto, and its ego, the nodal axis. And of course, as we're in that process of deconditioning and liberating, it's going to bring up all of our insecurities on an inner level, emotional, mental, spiritual, on an outer level in our physical world. And one of the reasons for this is the fact that anytime we look at the past in our life, individually or collectively, It will represent security because we already know it. It's already happened. We've already been there. And for many of us, that past just keeps getting projected forward. So when we then get pushed sometimes faster or more strongly into the future than what we're comfortable with, it can really feel like we are reaching for insecurity. It can literally feel insecure because it is an unknown path. We haven't been there yet. So what this interaction of these two planets with the moon's node will bring up for many of us is wanting to take charge and be in control of everything. Wanting to take charge of ourself, the other, whoever he, she, it may be in our world. Wanting to control our life and the environment around us. All the way out to wanting to control the world in general. Collective groups of people will be reaching to control their group, control their culture, their country, their nation, whatever you want to call it. Because again, change is quickening, change is happening faster than we are comfortable with. Because Uranus-Pluto is dealing with the nodes of the moon, the south node, the ego of the past, the north node, the ego we're striving towards. And this nodal axis of the moon is always our emotions. It is the leading edge of our emotional development. But these two powerhouse planets, as they have been building up steam for the last few years, it can have all of us over the course of this fall and winter and into next spring, feeling like we are on an emotional edge or precipice, and we never know where our emotions are going to take us from one moment to the next. And so we're searching for what feels like a bottom line emotionally. And hence it'll take us back to that past and wanting to project it forward again in order to feel secure. And this is all imprinted with Pluto in Capricorn. It's going to take the courage of Uranus in Aries to move through the insecurities of the future, not knowing quite where it is going to take us. Because all of these planetary archetypes and objects are taking place in cardinal signs of the zodiac, Uranus in Aries, Pluto in Capricorn, South Node Aries, North Node Libra, we will feel like our relationship issues have been pushed to front and center stage. And so all of us are noticing various relationship issues that are in our life, starting with an inner relationship with ourself, Pluto conjunct that South Node, and past life issues, issues from the past in this life, up in our face again. And how are we going to change this relationship with ourselves? Directly is going to have an impact on all of our familial relationships and the family patterns that are coming to the surface to be evolved, to be changed, to be confronted, to be addressed. Naturally, this will also involve partners, lovers, spouses. You can include friendships in here with Uranus conjunct the South Node. You can include our career, Pluto Capricorn. And you have to be a hermit to not be noticing what's going on in the world today with the social issues that are coming to the forefront, the national issues that are taking place right now with the falling price of oil and how it is shaking up the ruble in Russia. All of our world stage relationships are in an uproar. From who's going to run for president on the Republican Democratic sides of the ticket in the United States, to how our world leaders are interacting with each other in these changing social, political, economic environments. Everywhere you look, relationships are being pushed to the edge of comfort. And can we really make these steps forward versus falling back? A lot of what's pushing these relationship issues are a lot of our collective perspective on things. Pluto is the soul on a collective level as well as individual. And the waxing squares from Uranus in Aries is opening up brand new patterns and cycles. And so collective issues that have been under the surface or that have been running for a long time are all of a sudden bursting out all over the place. So collective issues such as relationships, as I said, with world leaders, with different political factions, with different perspectives on any social issue. Issues around health. Look at the Ebola issue we went through over the last few months. And recognizing that when it comes to diseases, they don't know political or geographical boundaries. So how are we working to address that in various levels? All of the monetary and fiscal policies. Many of you have heard me speak on this issue a lot over the last couple of years. I don't think I'll be quitting to speak on this issue, and I'm a very strong advocate of public banking versus private banking. And here in the United States, we just had both Democrats and Republicans pass a government spending bill that runs through the end of September 2015 that basically reinstated you and me in the United States, U.S. citizens as taxpayers, bailing out the too big to fail banks, just like we did in 2008. You want to go through that again? If it does, next time, bigger, stronger, larger upsets than what we went through this time. And quite frankly, if we don't change that around, I think it's going to be a foregone conclusion. And my predictions is somewhere between 2020 to 2025. Gun control, that was in the news today, not only in Sydney, Australia, but also in the United States. One more gunman shooting 6 more people in the Northeast. The parents and families of Sandy Hook going after the gun laws in this country and taking up the fight that your average citizen does not need an automatic rifle to protect him, herself in your daily life. And of course, whatever country you are from, all of your government issues rising to the surface. Every country is going to see most likely a polarity between what we could call the plutocrats, the haves, versus the citizens, the have-nots. And this issue is going to keep rising and expanding and expanding. In other words, from the Uranus-Pluto conjunctions in the 1960s in the middle degrees of Virgo, all the way to now, all the seed thoughts from the 60s are coming to the forefront because there must be some manifestation in the evolution of those issues. What these 2 planets in their aspects to the nodal axis is bringing up for all of us, from the most personal to the broadest levels, is a vacillation between the past and the future. I'm feeling like we are stuck in the middle, feeling paralyzed, feeling like we are running this way, running that way, running this way, running that way, and are we making progress? On the big levels, yes, we are, but it will not necessarily feel that way on an emotional day-to-day level. So as each of us reflect, you don't even have to look at astrology. As you just reflect upon what are the issues rising up in your day-to-day life over the course of this fall and into this winter, and what are the choices being presented to you in these day-to-day issues, small, big, and everything in between. The choices that you do make are going to have lasting consequences into your future. It's going to affect the future of this life, the rest of this life, and it will affect future lives that you will be setting up over the course of this winter. There is a little, well, perhaps, I don't know if it's a little known, maybe a well-known fact in evolutionary astrology. When we have natal planets square the nodes, it will represent skip steps with that planetary development on an egoic or emotional level from past lives. So when we see a planet that is squaring the nodes via transit in the sky, then all of us on a collective level are facing, again, resolving issues from the past. In this case, that South Node in Aries, and our own freedoms and liberations, and our own defensiveness and insecurities, and issues pertaining to our future and how we are going to evolve our relationships with ourselves, with another, with those in our lives, with our participation on planet Earth. So very important choice points on an individual and a collective level. And how I might invite you to address that issue is, what is the highest and best choices for me? What are the highest and best choices for me? What are the highest and best choices for my relationship involvements? How do I move forward minimizing my karma? How do I move forward minimizing my karma with others? Asking these questions out loud, and just asking and asking until your own intuition works to present answers to you. Even though Uranus is conjunct the South Node, however, you are meant to be moving forward. Uranus in Aries will be giving you future-orientated messages, and you pay attention to the element of repetition. And when that future-orientated message comes up again and again and again of its own volition, this is where your soul is needing to break free and move forward. And this is true regardless of how insecure or uncomfortable it may seem. If we refuse to address the lessons from the past of this life, past lives that are recycling back around, if we refuse to address issues in the present moment that seem to be recycling or surfacing for the first time, but there to the point that we recognize them, if we refuse to address these lessons, we will again create what appears to be these fated events into the future. We could come back another lifetime with Pluto square the nodes. We might come back another lifetime with Uranus conjunct the South Node. And when a planet is conjunct the South Node, there are three possibilities of what it means karmically. The first possibility is a relive situation. Something wasn't addressed with that planetary archetype within our ego in past lives. It could represent a fruition. In other words, we've made enough effort really trying to move something forward and accomplish it in our life, metamorphose the past into the future, and it comes in as a reward, a fruition. Or the third possibility, the most common, which is a combination of reliving past events and having the fruition of past efforts. So it's pretty heightened, and all of this, again, is happening to each of us on the most personal, intimate level. And the details are showed through your chart, by wherever Uranus, Pluto, and the nodal axis is in specific houses. And it is also carried out onto the broadest, most collective level between cultures and social groups and nations on planet Earth. Again, finally, one very common theme, relationships, relationships, relationships. Oh, did I mention relationships? I found this little joke here off of invisiblebread.com, and I thought it was kind of cute for perhaps lightening up the intensity of this subject. You're hardly ever all here, present. How can we have a relationship if I feel like a part of you is almost always missing, she says. Reflected back, I can't help it. I go through phases. It's a monthly thing, says the picture of the moon. Yeah, I have those too, but you don't see me disappearing, she says, period. I thought, oh, isn't that an interesting reflection of how we are all operating emotionally right now and kind of skipping around all over the place and getting emotionally triggered. And then are we in our body? Are we present? Are we listening? Can we hear what the other person is saying? Are we being heard when we speak? Do we de-escalate down into silence or arguments? Or do we make a step forward in reaching an ability to listen and hear as well as speak on a new level in a way that we haven't before? So a little bit of overview for you on the big themes that we're dealing with. Now I want to break it down just a little bit by these two planets and the nodes, and continue to address much of the same subjects, perhaps in a little more detail. We all know that Pluto is transiting through Capricorn, and it is there from 2008 through 2023, 24. And as we have Pluto square the nodes January 15th at 13.5 degrees Capricorn, anybody who has planets in Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, anywhere between, 8 to 17, 18 degrees of those cardinal signs will really be feeling the impact of Pluto square these nodes during the course of this winter. When we have the outer planets like Uranus, no, not so much Uranus, it depends on retrograde, but Neptune and Pluto, they tend to be an orb of squaring the nodes anywhere from 6 to 9 months. It's a long time for a lot of souls on the planet to be born with Pluto square the nodes. So the souls that are coming onto planet Earth right now are born with these skip steps in their soul from past lives. South Node Aries, North Node Libra, all of the relationship issue, and Pluto and Capricorn square the nodes, the ability to take responsibility for themselves and their world in their relationships. Stay tuned as these young souls evolve and grow. It won't all be disaster. Some of them will be ready to make some leaps of growth forward with these skip steps. It's going to depend upon each unique individual and their environmental conditionings, their parental background, their evolutionary state of their soul, etc. Now, if you have planets between, let's say, 8 to 18 degrees of the other signs, the fixed modality, the mutable modality, you too will be impacted by Pluto square the nodes. It might be a trine and sextile. It might be a semi-sextile and an inconjunct. It might be a semi-square and a sesquisquadrate. You have to look at those individual aspects. Let's just say on the broadest levels, Any planets in your chart between 8 and 18 degrees are going to be affected by the possibility of your own soul needing to really learn its lessons in relationships right now, both with self and with others. Now, the Pluto and Capricorn archetype, it merges the archetypes of Pluto and Saturn, which we know as the soul and the structure of its consciousness, respectively. And so Pluto's 15-year transit through Capricorn is destroying all kinds of outworn structures within our own soul's consciousness, our individuated consciousness, that no longer serves us. It's also doing it on a collective level. It's also destroying all of the old crystallized forms and structures that no longer serve our soul individually or collectively. And what is happening here, and here's those nodes, square Pluto, both as individuals and groups, we resist. Again, that past represents security. We will have a resistance to having these structures that we've created in our lives up to this point going through changes, going through demolition, going through death and rebirth. Pluto going through the upsets that are coming along. It is so much easier to cling to the status quo, to cling to the past. And any of you who are students of evolutionary astrology have probably recognized that the degree to which we resist the changes that Pluto brings about is the degree to which we will create cataclysms in our life. And with the South Node in Aries, this is going to be upsets to who we are, our self-identity, how we know ourselves. Uranus conjunct that South Node. It's putting 5 more exclamation points on that. And it's also going to be with the North Node in Libra, upsetting us in our own relationships and how we are moving forward with them. Especially relationships that are beyond what I like to call casual acquaintances. Libra is dealing with the diversity of relationships in our lives, but many times those one-on-one relationships. So, Uranus conjunct the South Node. It can include the friendships. However, that North Node in Libra, it will bring up the partner. It will bring up family. It will bring up workmates, bosses, employees. Again, everybody beyond casual acquaintance. And so how do you just observe these relationship issues coming up in your face? How is Pluto tearing down old structures? Can you be comfortable with moving forward not knowing what your new structures will be like? What tends to happen as we have all of our outer structures and forms torn down? Capricorn is a passive polarity archetype, and so Pluto in Capricorn, as it tears down that outer world, it forces reflection and involution inward. And we go to look at how our consciousness operates. What are our inner motivations, Pluto Capricorn? What are the dynamics and environmental conditionings, Capricorn, that we've grown up with? How has it affected how, again, our brain, our structure of consciousness actually operates day by day, moment by moment, square the nodes. And so there is a lot that we can become aware of on a motivational perspective. What trips our trigger? What gets us motivated and active? What is the juice that has us alive? There's so much of that that is being analyzed and looked at inwardly. And there's so much tension with Uranus square Pluto on these nodes that with the effort, Pluto always requires a conscious will and effort to change. With an effort, we can make leaps of growth with Pluto square the nodes. So for a moment, just reflect on where Pluto in Capricorn is transiting in your own chart. What house is it in? And as you reflect upon that transiting Pluto house, what's being torn down in your world? What career structure, familial structure, what are the archetypes of that house that are being torn down, that don't function anymore? How are you being pulled inward to reflect upon those house transit archetypes? How are you being asked to change the way you address those Pluto transit by house archetypes? Wherever that Pluto transit is by house, the nodal axis is going to be squaring it from 2 more houses, and there's going to be a 4th point, the polarity point of Pluto, which is Cancer. You're going to have Cancer on a house cusp or intercepted in a house, and it's by looking over to that opposite house in your chart that you're going to have to go inward and find the inner depth of security, the emotional maturation process, as we call it, with the Cancer polarity to Pluto in Capricorn. Let me just throw an example out for you. Let's just say we have transiting Pluto in Capricorn in the 9th house. And so if we're looking at issues with a 9th house transit, we maybe have our belief structures and how we operate in our outer environment based upon our beliefs. Maybe we're liberal, maybe we're conservative, maybe we don't even believe in religion or spirituality. And yet whatever our belief structure has been, it doesn't make sense anymore. It's crumbling. And via that Cancer polarity in the 3rd house, somebody's in our face about it, 3rd house communication. Somebody is pulling the plug out from underneath our security issues, and we have to go inward, 3rd house, and process through the emotional Cancer reactionism of the 3rd house and find an inner security. And from EA's perspective, recognize that there are so many different paths home that we've got to reach inwardly for the one that makes the most emotional sense to us in that regard. And if that Uranus South Node conjunction in Aries happens to be falling in the 12th house, we'll have all kinds of new belief systems opening up for ourselves, which is going to lead to Libra North Node in the 6th, of really putting those beliefs into practice in our relationships. There's all kinds of things that can be coming up in regards to this. What I'm trying to point out is you're all going to have the cardinal signs making a grand cross, making the cross, so to speak, the 4 points on houses in your chart. It's not rocket science. You all can just reflect on where that Pluto house is and take it from there. And then what will happen through this Pluto square the nodes, the Pluto in Capricorn transit, what we have to do is go back out and recreate that outer world. via the Pluto and Cap house transit. And that means we have to take responsibility for ourselves, our own actions, our life, our situations, our limitations, our obligations, our responsibilities. We have to take responsibility for everything in our life via that Pluto house transit. And then that's going to create that metamorphosis that we call the physical maturation process through Capricorn, which means we become an adult or we evolve as an adult regardless of our biological, chronological age. And those nodes, again, will have us vacillating back and forth between ourself and others who are in our life on a very personal level as we are moving through that responsibility. And of course, if I may just side note from the archetype of Pisces 12th house and ruler Neptune, we are ultimately responsible for co-creating everything in our life consciously and unconsciously with Source itself. And then that means that we do have ultimate responsibility for our world, regardless of the emotions that are going through. Emotional denial, emotional anger, emotional upset, emotional peace, emotional maturation, as we make peace with, if it's in my world, I've co-created it, how do I move through my process with it? What's my role? What's not my role? How's my role changing in my world, in my relationships? Pluto in Capricorn always has us reviewing our value systems that end up creating what we call our standards of right, wrong conduct. And of course, many times what we consider right, wrong is very conditioned upon us by family, by relationships, by culture, by society. And if we step out of what we call right, wrong, we come up with judgments about it. And we're made to feel guilty if we don't agree with those standards of right, wrong conduct. Pluto being Pluto, it's going to break down those old standards and reveal their limitations. It's going to show us where we are not conforming to any society's values or rules anymore. We don't see that any stronger right now than what's been happening the last few weeks in the United States with all the posters about Black Lives Matter. And individual situations, regardless who was guilty, who was not, who was right, who was wrong, we can see on a broader collective level that there is a lot of racial profiling of Black youth. And it needs to change. And how we have the police forces all across the country addressing this issue and needing to change their conditioning, needing to change their projections, and peoples all around standing up and saying, this old standard of right, wrong conduct is not going to work anymore. They're standing in the streets, they're laying down in the streets. So Pluto in Capricorn brings us through a major evolution of society itself and societal responsibilities to our families, to our children, to our elders, to the differences in cultures and how cultures are evolving. Religion, economic, environmental, all of them. All you got to do is look around, you see those changes. Now, with Pluto square the nodes, as we're looking at this evolution of society itself, we go back and forth between societal standoffs between the different groups. I'm right, you're wrong. And the groups being able to evolve. Give you an example of how we are perhaps moving through some of those evolutions in the United States, and I thank international listeners for allowing my U.S. perspective as example. In the United States, when we look at the issue of gender rights in the right to marry, we now have, I think the count is 32 or 33 states that now on a legal basis support the right of gays and lesbians to be married and have all of their civil rights along with that. This is where the standoffs, South Node in Aries, between, being totally on the side of marriages between a man and a woman to the side of, it doesn't matter, I love this person, I don't care about their gender, and all that polarization, South Node Aries, North Node Libra. We've been moving towards that North Node in Libra and creating a larger perspective in society. We're doing the same thing with the war on drugs when it comes to marijuana. Now, those are not just simple issues. There's all kinds of sub-issues in society as well along with it. But we can see how there's broad perspective and evolution of how we look at various subjects that are moving through. Think back into the, it goes back further, but think back into the 60s when we had the Uranus-Pluto conjunctions, and back then how you had to be very careful if a black and a white person wanted to be in an intimate relationship together, male, female, let alone whether or not they were gay. Look at how that was such a taboo and how that has broken free. Now, there's a few states that still have laws on the books that blacks and whites can't marry, believe it or not. I think it's less than 5. It's just a handful. But look at how that was such an issue coming up through the 1930s when we had Uranus last quarter square Pluto, the 1960s when we had Uranus conjunct Pluto. And now you look at it, and yes, it's an issue in some places, but it's changed so much, we don't think very much of it anymore. Other issues have come to the forefront with the Uranus-Pluto squares. And so just as society itself is going to go through evolution, with or without Pluto square the nodes, Pluto in Capricorn, we also then have the evolution of government itself, no matter what country you're in, and what kind of a role does government have for its citizens, for its society or groups of society that are within any government. And what we are seeing right now with Pluto square the nodes, is it going to be government for all of its people, which would be the North Node in Libra, or government for the favored few, what we want to so many times term the plutocrats with Capricorn. So it's an interesting Pluto in Capricorn, the word comes up, which could be the Uranus in Aries. You could reverse it, you can see it the other direction, but can you see how Pluto and Cap square the nodes over the course of this winter? It's really bringing it up more and more starkly. For instance, in the United States, is it a government of the people, for the people, by the people, if I have it right, or is it of the 1%, for the 1%, and by the 1%? A stark contrast. And so there will be things that will happen throughout the course of this winter that will play out over the course of 2015, that will play out over the next 4.5 years until we have the South Node conjunct Pluto, that will play out over the next, what would that be, 13.5, 14.5 years when we have Pluto square the nodes with the nodes switched. In other words, that nodal cycle, nodes of the moon, has about an 18.6-year cycle. And so we'll see that these issues would be carried forward with those numbers every 9.5 years, every 19 years, so to speak. We'll see those issues kind of rise up in various levels for all of us. Pluto in Capricorn has all of us facing hormonal, racial, gender issues as you're looking at these in the news. Again, seemed like through much of 2014 we had a lot of the LBGT issues, and now they've kind of fallen to the wayside. And isn't it interesting how racial issues have come up? And with the Bill Crosby sexual scandal, with the rape on campus scandals, both the real thing and some false ones, which is not unusual, the way that that issue has been suppressed. See how those issues have been coming up here in the news, rising to the forefront themselves? Pluto in Capricorn square the nodes, Aries, Libra, Venus, Mars, he said, she said, coming out. Who's right, who's wrong, and sometimes it's not even that. It's just raising up the polarization and how through all of the patriarchal conditionings, Capricorn, Cancer is gender issues. Capricorn so can relate to patriarchal principles, Cancer to matriarchal principles, as we see these patriarchal conditionings being exposed through this Pluto square the nodes in Capricorn. Are we going to address them? Are we going to slap something on the face and have to deal with them again? Are we going to suppress them under the rug? The more that we resist the changes in what we will call natural law of having equality between races, equality between genders, equality as citizens of planet Earth, regardless of our skin color or pigment, regardless of our sexual organs, regardless of the color of our eyes, regardless of how much money we have in our bank accounts. If we're not addressing those equality issues, Uranus, then again, Pluto square the nodes, we're just going to set them up to come forward again in the future, more magnified. Pluto in Capricorn's bringing up all of the responsible parenting issues, familial values, how we structure our home environments, all the judgments we have around that. All of us are going to have various familial changes that are taking place. For instance, in my family, just on a very generic level, in the last year, I have lost 3 aunts. Mom and dad both come from big families. My parents are later 70s, early 80s. Mom lost 2 sisters. My dad lost 1. And all of a sudden, our family, I'm the oldest of 3 girls. All 3 girls are married. My parents are starting to have discussions about long-term health care for both of them. And how will we address this amongst the children? Now we're getting together in Christmas to set up the discussions to literally have meetings in January when all of us girls will be home at my parents' for a family event. And we're going to take time out to meet with legal authorities. With my parents, they're farmers, and so we have land. And so we are meeting to discuss adult daughters and son-in-laws of how we are going to be proactive with the changing of the guard, the changing of familial responsibilities with my mom and dad, while my parents still have their faculties about them. It's a little bit more of a maybe a positive example, although we are noticing one parent, my father, with early dementia, and we'll see how it turns out as we go through this. And will we have a changing of the guard in regards to taking over the responsibility of the family land before the parents are gone? Who knows? Stay tuned, we'll see. But so here's the issue being brought up in my family with all of the familial structures starting to change and having discussion about it. Not, as you very well know, not everything on planet Earth is going to have to be hell in a handbasket with what's going on. It could feel that way, and it might be that way more often than not because we have so much distortion from natural law taking place on planet Earth, but it is not a given. And so you can see with my example as well, how in my family of origin, we are going through these lessons with the mortality of space and time. Pluto and Capricorn will have all of us going through a quickening, especially with the Uranus and Aries square, a quickening of our understandings of mortality, of being able to function in space and time. Let me give you one more example. It's a pretty little, it's a little sweet one. Some of you may be familiar with, I and Leroy had to help one of our elder cats cross over back into the spirit world a little over a week ago. I have a 4.5-year-old niece. She's a Pluto in Capricorn in the 7th house. She has a South Node in she's Pluto in Capricorn. She has a South Node in Cancer, but North Node is not conjunct Pluto. They're wide enough that they're different houses. Most of the time, children don't learn about mortality and space-time. They don't know how to really function in that space-time medium until about the first Saturn square at about 7 years. So it's about 7, 8 years old. Well, my sister, my baby sister, who's mother of this 4.5-year-old, called me this weekend, and her and her husband and my niece went to some animated cartoon this weekend. They went to the movies, and a little child died in the movies. It was just an accident. It wasn't any, this is animated cartoons. It wasn't too deep. I don't think. According to my sister, it didn't seem that way. It was just a little accident, and a little child died. And they came out of the movie. They put her in the car seat. They were getting ready to drive away, and all of a sudden, from the back seat, my little niece is just raging, tears, crying, just can't even speak. She's crying so badly, And my sister husband look at each other and go, "What was that all about? We thought that was a happy movie." And they ask her, and my kitty's name is Mr. T, and my little niece was beside herself. "I won't ever see Mr. T again. I don't want him to be gone. He's the only one that likes me out of Aunt Kimmy's kitties." I have 2 twins, and they don't do well with children. And so my sister and I marveled at a 4-year-old child, Pluto in Capricorn, who already has that concept of mortality at that age. That's some of the quickening that Pluto in Capricorn is bringing in. There's many of these little Pluto and Capricorn souls, those that have been coming on since 2008, those that are coming through with Pluto square the nodes. They're really going to be born knowing the fragility of life as we know it here on planet Earth, especially in regards to the disregarding the values of our resources and all of the climate change that it's creating. So there's this Pluto and Capricorn square the nodes. There can be a quickening of understanding this space-time situation that's going on, not just with our elders, but with Gaia, planet Earth itself. And what we can be looking at on a collective level is setting up skip steps around that if we go into the denial of it. Capricorn likes to suppress, it likes to deny. I don't want to look at what is really happening right now. Uranus conjunct that south node. We can go into defensiveness if others, North Node Libra, are telling us things that we don't want to look at or that we don't want to recognize as physical reality in our world. We can be setting up collective skip steps, especially around environmental climate change issues, especially around monetary, fiscal policy issues, resource issues, in all kinds of countries and planet Earth. I'm going to move through this same exercise with Uranus in Aries. And then I'll finish up a little bit with the nodes, and I do have some examples from the US chart. Let me take a moment here and just see if there's any questions with anything that I'm saying. Am I addressing what you want to know? Is there anything I haven't quite looked at yet that you want me to address for anybody? Pretty silent here. Leroy, you are welcome to speak up if you have any comments that come through for you as I'm rattling off things and getting into my flow here.
No questions on the board. You're covering a lot of information very well.
I'm trying to weave it back and forth between individual and collective because we're all experiencing it that way simultaneously. Each of us are experiencing these aspects right now on a very personal, individual level, and it might feel almost like it's building in intensity as we move through to January, and then as we even go into the eclipses, because the lunar eclipse that is coming in early April will touch upon all these issues and bring them right back around, because that lunar eclipse is taking place at 14.5 degrees Libra Aries, and it will be a total lunar eclipse for us, and it'll touch base on that lunar eclipse degrees that we had back in early October as well. So it will stretch itself out. Pluto square the nodes, Uranus conjunct the south node. It's going to stretch itself out from the north node eclipse season that we had in October all the way through the south node eclipse season that we have coming up in March, April. That's going to be probably that 6-month window where it is the most intense. And then again, as we know with these Uranus-Pluto squares, they'll be impacting changes on planet Earth for at least the next 10 years, if not the next 30 years, up until the Uranus-Pluto oppositions. And they've been coming into effect since the Uranus-Pluto conjunctions in the 1960s. So as we focus on this a little bit from the perspective of Uranus in Aries, we can see here that Uranus is in Aries from 2010 all the way through 2018 when it moves into Taurus. And it'll go back and forth in 2017-18 between Aries and Taurus. We are merging here the archetypes of Uranus and Mars. And so Uranus in Aries is deconditioning the leading edge of our dual desire nature. Uranus is deconditioning and liberating. Mars, ruler of Aries. Aries is that leading edge of the dual desire nature, the desire to separate from that which created us, the separating desires, and the desire to return to that which created us, the desire to know source energy. So Uranus in Aries is starting a brand new 84-year cycle through the zodiac. So it's a new 84-year cycle of liberation for all of us as individuals, regardless of what our chronological age is, and for all of us on a collective level on planet Earth, whatever groups, cultures, societies, countries, belief systems we participate in. All of them are being liberated. Just look at the things that are coming out of Pope Francis' mouth these days. Things that you'd never thought you'd hear a Catholic Pope say, especially coming off of the one who came before him. So what will happen, as we have said before, is on the collective levels, and especially that consensus evolutionary state, the 7 out of 10 that are kind of like cowbells around their necks. They believe whatever they're told by their conditioning factors in society, religion, family, environment, government, etc., versus individuating 2 out of 10 people breaking free from consensus, and that 1 out of 10 who's spirituating and really understanding deepest levels of natural law, universal timeless truths. The consensus collective tends to repeat cycles again and again and again because we again projecting that path forward to be secure. But that short memory that we have on a collective level, we tend not to learn from history, and in the patriarchal world, the history gets distorted and it's written by those who win the battles or the wars, and so they write their version versus perhaps what's really going on. So there's that strong energy to project the path forward and repeat it. You need something to shake it up, and I don't know of anything that does it better than Uranus in Aries, except maybe Uranus and Pluto in Aries together. So even though we're wanting to cling to the past for those security reasons, it's really tough to do so right now. But then, as I said earlier, it really pushes the insecurity buttons. And as we've had Uranus conjunct the South Node in Aries for the last few months, again, looking at it for the most part as almost a 6-month influence this time with Uranus and its retrograde cycle, we have a lot of collective or consensus defensiveness that wants to take place. Uranus conjunct that South Node in Aries. How dare you tell me that? And we argue it, and we argue it, and we argue it, and we argue it again, defending our past because it's what we know. Little example we had tonight, we have a teenager who is a lot of Pisces in the chart, quite the space cadet, and used the argument, well, you guys have known I've been that way my whole life, so what's the big deal? And clinging to that defensiveness of space cadet when we're going North Node, Libra, perhaps when your parents say something, you can make an effort to listen, especially if one or both parents say it 3 or more times, because we're trying to help you remember. And we came back as that South Node conjunct Aries defensiveness went through, and we're like, train the brain, train the brain, train the brain. And so all of us are going to have an almost automatic, instinctive Aries defensiveness that goes on within us, within ourself, within whoever we're in relationship with. From, again, friends to family to lovers to work to coworkers to whoever it's working through. It's going to be automatic with the South Node in Aries to just instinctively want to defend and be secure. And it's coming off of hundreds of thousands of years in human consciousness on an unconscious level of having to fight or flight. And we don't have to do that anymore, yet it is very instinctive in many of us. So it's really going to take some of those Uranian sparks to wake us up and go, whoa, that was really defensive. That was really in their face, or they were in my face, or whew, boy, I just got triggered and lost my ability to listen to what anybody was saying to me. And so we're going to have to make very strong efforts with this Uranus in Aries, especially as it's conjunct the South Node, and just being able to take a deep breath, being able to breathe, pace ourselves, literally self-talk. Okay, how can I listen? How can I look at this at a different perspective? How can I think about this differently? What are my other choices, North Node in Libra, on how I could move forward in this area that has got me so triggered? And what we're going to find, if we just naturally reflect upon where we feel emotionally triggered in our lives as an individual, South Node Aries, if we just naturally reflect on it, we're going to find that there are going to be some areas of our life where we want to throw off that past and we want to move forward. For Leroy and Kim Marie, it's cleaning the house from top to bottom. If our friend Robin, who saw us in August, is listening, you wouldn't recognize the house. Half the house. We're not done yet. Then we have where we're going to resist the changes in other areas. We're going to dig in and be defensive and argue that same old argument with our kid or our spouse or our parent or our boss or the next door neighbor or whoever. And so what we're going to find via Uranus in Aries is where we feel comfortable with changing. We're going to make leaps forward, breaking free, moving towards that North Node in Libra and feeling comfortable about it, feeling excited about it, looking forward to the new environment, Libra, new relationships. And where we are still clinging to the past, defensive, we're going to resist the change. And so Uranus in Aries, as it's conjunct that South Node, it's going to continue to bring through messages that are going to pop into consciousness on patterns, cycles, areas where we feel insecure. And we're going to have to use that Uranus South Node conjunction in Aries to open up, question. How do I look at this differently? We might have to make the effort, Uranus oppose the North Node, to initiate conversations. And I want to hear your feedback, and I'll try to keep my lips zipped while you talk, and I'll do my best to listen and reflect on it if I'm too triggered. We can ask another to do the same for us. That's going to be some of the biggest impacts with Uranus in Aries, where we feel ready to move forward. We are a rocket in space. Where we are not ready to move forward, we could be digging in our heels, and the insecurity could be increasing the squares from Pluto. And as you see, this will be happening for us on individual and collective levels. You'll look at groups of people, you'll look at various governments, and there's going to be areas where they are willing to make leaps forward in collective changes. For instance, as I said before, here in the US, the LBGT issue is just it's becoming a steamroller with over, 3/5 of the states moving forward. And yet, look at, for instance, on the whole immigration issue and how we have the conservatives digging in their heels about the whole immigration thing. And I'm sorry, this is just me personally, but so help me, if you have a white European background, you are the fluffin' immigrant. Sorry, I live up here in the Northern Plains and a lot of Native American culture, and it's kind of hilarious to watch white Europeans speak this way. So we'll see how that one gets catapulted forward as we have Uranus in Aries conjunct the South Node, defensiveness and lines in the sand and polarization, etc. Uranus in Aries really, really wants us to just have the freedom to move forward, to break off everything that came before in the last 84 years. All of the societal conditionings that came over the last, break it out to the next century if you want to, from 84 years. So, again, how well can we listen to the feedback from others? Are we resisting it? That North Node Libra polarity. Are we quieting ourselves down and really, really listening? Are we finding others unable to listen to us? Uranus, even though it's conjunct the South Node, is still going to give us messages about our future. Can we pay attention to what's popping in of its own volition into our consciousness again? That's where our own soul is meant to move in the next 6 months, year, 2 years. Pace yourself about getting overexcited, because one of the things that can happen with Aries is they take 2 or 3 steps forward and then they got to go back 1 step and finish up what they glossed over, what they didn't quite want to look at. And that's where the South Node in Aries might be a little helpful, because Uranus in Aries wants to race ahead so much, it's going to want to go A, E, I, P, Z, and we're going to have to go A, B, C, B, C, D, E, D, E, F. I can't sing, but you get the point of what I am talking about, in that, yes, we can really have some energy to throw off the past and to move forward, but we have to have a little bit of pacing here, or we're going to have to go back and do something more than once, perhaps, especially with Pluto square the nodes and a wanting to race forward. It might be that if some of us have relationship wounding, Uranus South Node Aries and Pluto square the nodes, we may jump out of our isolation into what we like to say, the next one who comes along, without really checking in to see if they walk their talk and they're really who they say they are. And so we've got to, as we are wanting to move forward from the relationship intimacy perspective, as I like to say it, companionship, friendship, then intimacy. And if we try to jump right into the intimacy, we may wake up one day and go, who's the stranger I've been in bed with? We have one of our young friends going through that right now, and we listened to him over the weekend, really being knocked off his rocks because of looking at the partner and going, I thought I knew her. And all of a sudden, having Pluto in Capricorn realities revealed to him, that was very traumatizing for him. And we had some one-on-one words to hopefully help him go back finding himself again and recognizing some different ways to approach relationships. Some of our young Pluto Libras and Pluto and Scorpios, they don't always have healthy relationship boundaries, and they jump right into the sexual intimacies and then get distorted all over the place with an ability to be objective. And that North Node in Libra is asking for objectivity from us, especially around relationships, as we recognize all of these new things about ourself that used to be so unconscious. Uranus Aries South Node. Uranus, believe me, whatever you hold within your own individuated unconsciousness, Uranus in Aries is throwing it up left and right, left and right, left and right, left and right. Leroy and I had a conversation last weekend that involved the crossing over of our beloved pet and interactions with his familial environment, and me coming home and stating to him that I really had light bulbs going off in conversation with his parents about some of the conditionings that he was brought up with around death and grief and dying, and the inability to acknowledge it or process through it. So we're all going to have unconscious things about ourselves as an individual that's coming up, and sometimes reflected through the environment of the other sharing it with us. And of course, with Uranus conjunct that South Node, we have to be very, very careful of trauma and re-imprinting it, when what the intent is to cast off the old traumas and the conditioning patterns that were created via trauma. Think back on that. Uranus in Aries, first quarter square, Pluto in Capricorn. We are all trying to throw off old conditioning patterns from past traumas and break free, be more than we were before. So if we are undergoing any trauma re-imprinting, it may be to the degree that we resist any signs, quote unquote, to change. If if you're getting those little messages in your head about what you need to do different and what you need to do different and how you need to do this different or that different or be in this relationship differently or handle money differently or, approach your beliefs differently. If you're getting any future orientated messages and you ignore them or suppress them, Pluto in Capricorn square the nodes, then you may have some upset come along and you could re-imprint trauma. You could re-traumatize yourself. You could traumatize yourself anew. So making that effort as much as possible to become conscious of what's there about the past being revisited and address it. To become conscious of those future-orientated messages and address them. To become conscious of what you're trying to just suppress and ignore and not deal with. And address it. Move through. And find the ways to mentally process. The mental therapies can be as much a part of the picture here as the emotional therapies. And of course, on a collective level with Uranus in Aries, the technological advances that are leaping forward. We have inventors, leaders, scientists, you name it. There's just, it's hard to keep up. And we can get so caught up with Pluto in Capricorn and having to have the latest material, this and that and everything. And sometimes we'll have technological advances that are racing ahead of the moral issues. That creates its own trauma. That creates its own social upsets. For instance, on a consensus level in the United States, we have our Department of Homeland Security that has been given excess military equipment up the yin-yang, more than we need, more than, from my perspective, what our police departments should even have in dealing with the public. You all remember Ferguson, Missouri, when the issue, the first time things broke out and from the black youth that was killed, and here's the police showing up in SWAT outfits and armored trucks, and just total Pluto Capricorn heavy-handed. And Uranus in Aries conjunct that south node, boomeranged back. And many people were just, flabbergasted. Oh my God, that is what our police departments have? And this is a little suburb of some city in the Midwest, let alone our major cities? And for those of you who haven't heard this on the podcast, one of those little technological advances in our small community in South Dakota, who got more Homeland Security funds than we knew what to do with. Some of our stuff, I don't know if we have any armored cars. I'm not aware of it. We probably got all the fancy machines, guns, and all that stuff. But one of the things that we did get in a lot of our small communities is body cameras for our policemen. So in our small South Dakota communities, we've had policemen wearing body cameras now for years, and they absolutely love it. The police chiefs love it. The city mayors love it because both sides behave better when they know they're both being recorded. Everybody, North Node in Libra goes on their best behaviors. So the moral issues that come up with this Uranus transit through Aries, and they're going to be highlighted with Uranus in Aries conjunct the South Node. Look at the cyber attacks on Sony Pictures and all of the private stuff that is being revealed. What you're learning about cyberspace, if you don't want somebody to find out about it, Don't type it out there. You don't want somebody to see a picture of you naked. Don't take naked pictures. We're all having to learn how to be better social beings with our cyber hacks, because all of a sudden we're realizing nothing's private anymore. Might not all be a bad thing in regards to that, but it is really creating some efforts for us as cultures and as governments to catch up. How are you feeling exposed by technology? How are you feeling in some of those situations? You know, I read something here as I was doing some prep for this class about someone in the tech world who says, listen, I bought a Drobo. We have a Drobo. We use it to back up all of our course materials on DVDs, etc. That's just a large unit. It's a larger unit that can hold a lot of cyber data, or a lot of data. You know, or if you don't have a lot of data, your USB, you know, little plugins that holds data. You know, this techno thing said, listen, I keep everything offline. I only put onto my computer what I need to work with, and then I unplug my storage unit so nobody can come through and get my stuff. But oh, and then this same person said, but oh, by the way, if you don't want anybody to see naked pictures of you, don't take naked pictures. So there's a lot of uproar around all of this. And Uranus in Aries, what is our personal privacy? Should we have government spying on us? Pluto and Cap square the nodes. So as you can see here, what we're going to is there's a lot of social unrest as all kinds of cultures and societies decide how we are going to evolve together in the cyber world. Where does privacy end? And, you know, a free game start. Any of you see the pictures of Prince George of England recently? Um, they released, I don't know, half a dozen pictures of him. And what's his name? Prince William and Catherine, I think, yep. You know, they have really strongly suggested to the media in Britain that their little baby is hands off in regards to photos. And for the most part, the British media has really honored that. And so they've released these pictures of little Prince William, and he's absolutely adorable. He's got a lot of cancer in his chart. I think he's sun in Cancer as well. And so anyway, they feel that they have publicly released those pictures, William and Kate, in such a way that, you know, they're fulfilling their public role in sharing information with the public so that it lessens that need of the media and paparazzi feeling like they've got to go underhanded about it. So there could be a more positive way in which we're doing that social interchange between privacy rights and public, you know, desire to know, I guess I would say. So Uranus in Aries will take us from the extremes of anarchy, where there's absolutely no rules whatsoever, to rioting in the streets, to social movements being able to take off. And as we have seen throughout Uranus in Aries in 2010, we have what we call a social moment. And we question, will the social moment turn into a social movement? Where will it? When will it? How will it? We thought Occupy Wall Street might make a difference in a social movement with our monetary policies, which is my little baby, which, by the way, if you are interested in my perspectives on that in more detail, I would suggest that you go to our website, and I have two individual webinars from fall of 2013. What are they called? Money, Past, Present, and Future. The past part one and the future part two. And I go into more detail how I really advocate public banking and public monetary policies, which I, again, think will be coming to a head, but I will leave you to more details of that information, or as I many times tell people, get the Public Banking Solution book by Ellen Brown, join the publicbankinginstitute.org in the United States. You can join it if you're international and still get a lot of information on public versus private banking. Just start searching it on Google, because we do not have our public banking structures very well structured. Pluto in Capricorn is entrenching it more and more between the haves and the have-nots, and we're creating unsustainable banking systems. We will have another crash similar to 2008, and it may come faster than we think. With oil prices, it may extend itself out, but sometimes I get afraid of being on my soapbox because I feel so strongly about this issue, and prosperity for all with natural law and inclusive giving and sharing. And so I leave you to those sources. Both of those lectures are also in section 3 of the Astral Library, if you care to find them there, as well as a wealth of other information. So we have to all look at, how fast our governments can adjust to the intensity of social changes that are taking place. And I'll tell you, we're going to go through the first 6 months of 2015, and one moment it's going to be a government resisting XYZ, and the next moment the government is going to have done a 180 and be leaping forward on that subject. If the Republicans in the United States have their way and really start heavy-handedness with the deportation issue of immigrants, watch for that to be a social unrest in the streets even stronger than Black Lives Matter social movement. And part of it, what we may be seeing long range here in the next 5 to 10 years, is all of these different social subjects coming together under one umbrella or under various umbrellas where the masses really do take off. Stay tuned. A lot of that stuff doesn't happen because we've opened our lives and our eyes and seen the light. Many times the changes happen via necessity due to the Pluto and Cap clinging to the past and control and wanting security at all costs. So stay tuned as we watch that ebb and flow. Just know that most likely it's going to be some pretty intense roller coaster rides. And so again, Uranus in Aries is really asking for each of us to find our courage to break free from our own personal past and move into who we really are, to break free from consensus and social conditionings, religious conditionings, economic conditionings, to break free from that stuff, to break free from past life patterns. And Uranus in Aries is a real strong point on being able to be a group of one, to be uniquely who we are. And then from that foundation, from creating that new level of inner security, Uranus in Aries conjunct that South Node, to really learn to be ourselves, having that courage to then move forward into relationships in different ways, to participate in groups in different ways. As each of you see these changes just exploding in your own lives and the changes that each of you are having to make on your own individual ways, where are you motivated to participate collectively? If you're listening to this call, it behooves each and every one of us to be a part of the change in the world that we want to see in the world. So here are the dates that the nodal axis is moving through Libra Aries, North Node Libra, South Node Aries, February 19th, 2014 through November 12th, 2015. So you can see that this is a transit that we're just in the middle of, and we're going to go most of the way through 2015 with the same nodal vibration. South Node in Aries is the ego from the past and what we are having to throw off on emotional levels. So it's asking us to shed old ego, old childhood wounds, old insecurities. It's asking us to shed freedom at all costs. We don't operate in isolation. We all operate in relationships of some kind and some sort. We have to shed the old me versus you patterns and defenses, individually and collectively. And as we're shedding that old, egoic, emotional, wounded stuff, we have to reach for new levels of emotional security, especially inner emotional security. Uranus in Aries is going to be opening us up to recognize how each of us are going to be doing that. That North Node in Libra is the ego of the future, how we are striving to evolve on emotional levels. All of us are being asked to find new levels of inclusiveness in relationships. New levels of finding ways to get along with other individuals, other groups of people. If we don't, we remain stuck in the South Node Aries polarizations. We're being asked to find a new self as we're evolving into new relationships with whoever that other is in our life. What do you want to see changing in your relationships? Make your best efforts to do so. And if the relationship doesn't work out, you've made your best effort and you've minimized any karmic repercussions for yourself. And in that same perspective, we will be taking collective relationships to brand new levels. And if not, they're going to degenerate into even more, as we said, polarizations. Here's the charts. When we have, and you can have this then if you want to do a printout of this slide when we follow up. Pluto square the nodes, January 15th. It's 2:57 a.m. Mountain Time in Rapid City. Uranus conjunct that south node is January 20th, 4:27 a.m. Mountain Time in Rapid City, which is where Leroy and I live. So you can see here the degrees. Of course, these are the 0-degree Aries charts because you all can do charts for your own locations, your own cities, your own countries. I'll show you the U.S. charts here in a moment. What we have to be careful of if you're looking at these charts in some ways, what we have to be careful of with the Pluto square the nodes, both of them, we're going to have Mars in Pisces here with Neptune in Chiron. We got to be careful of sticking our head in the sand and not wanting to make the actions we need to make. Both of these charts will have Jupiter retrograde in Leo opposite Mercury Venus over here in Aquarius. really have to watch the polarization of elitism between countries and groups of people, financially between the haves and the have-nots as it's taking place. Sun's going to be late Capricorn into early Aquarius, and we're going to have a new moon that comes along right after the Uranus conjunction to that south node. And so there's going to again be that vacillation between supporting the past Capricorn and liberating into the future Aquarius. That we all, in our individual ways will be working with from one perspective to another. Saturn will have moved into early Sagittarius in both of these charts. It's now in the sign of the fire trine with Jupiter and this Uranus south node, and it will move into an exact trine with that. It'll do this 3 times with its own retrograde cycle here in early Aries. They won't be by degrees, but again, you'll have the empathy with the planets in the signs. And I've got to take my headset off and move my kitty out, or you're all going to hear my kitty who wants to be petted. This is, so excuse me just a moment. Hey now, come on. Yes. It's not quite done yet. Just a little longer. Just a little. Just a little. Thank you, I'm back. So I wasn't, to me, it's not so much an exact chart. It is the big trends that are going on that we're about in the middle of over this 6 months time period. And it's the larger trend of the Uranus-Pluto waxing squares that are going to continue to impact us through the next decade. Here's the eclipses. We have that total solar eclipse, March 20th, tail end of Pisces. There's the visibilities for it. And then that's followed by a total lunar eclipse at, again, 1424, Sun in Aries, North Node in Libra, and we're going to have that Sun smack dab within orb of conjunction between Uranus in Aries and that South Node in Aries. And you can see where it's going to be visible at moonrise and where it will be visible at moonset. So we will be able to see it in North and South America for those of you who are in the US and Canada. And it won't be in the middle of the night. It'll be, visible in the daylight for many of us. But what it's going to do is it's just going to activate whatever comes between now and then. It's just going to be more and more activated. We have a South Node eclipse season, so that means the past coming forward again. It means the past being readdressed again, looked at again. We have a solar eclipse first, followed by a lunar eclipse, which means that we'll be making efforts to move forward. And it's quite possible that they could be sabotaged, blow up in our face, or we have more information that needs to be included into the picture before we really can move forward. Here is the chart for the United States. Thank you, international listeners, for this example. I use the Gemini chart. It's going to be impactful whether you use the Gemini chart with the 2:17 a.m. rising on July 4th, 1776, or whether you use the Sibley chart, which I want to say is 5:10 p.m. Don't remember for sure. Don't quote me on that. either chart, you have the U.S. with the sun in Cancer, and it is square Saturn in Libra. And this Saturn square is that tension or cross purposes in the U.S. between wanting to be very warm and fuzzy and polarized with just these two different viewpoints of how we look at things between what we call blue and red or liberal and conservative in this country, between what is tradition and what is moving forward on collective leading edge levels. You can see that the nodes of the moon here are getting ready to, or they would have just went over, North Node would have just went over the U.S. Saturn in Libra. It is just getting ready to square the U.S. Sun in Cancer. Uranus is looking at doing the same thing. Uranus has been going back and forth so far this year. I'll show you dates here of the 3 times Uranus has been making its aspects. In 2014, opposing Saturn. This has been all of those social groups breaking free and liberating, squaring the sun, similar stuff. What we have moving forward here is the fact that we're going to have between 2014 and 15, Pluto opposing the U.S. Sun and making first quarter squares with the U.S. Saturn. I'll show you some of my highlights with that. It's things we've already discussed. The blue stars are the transits of Uranus, Pluto, and the nodes. Note though, along this January time period, I use the Pluto date, all right? Notice, remember, we had Mercury and Venus traveling in Aquarius, moving over the South Node in Aquarius for the U.S. chart, getting ready in a few days to move over the natal Moon in Aquarius. Sooner or later, these social moments are going to turn into social movements and almost seem to take on a life of their own. You can see we'll have during the Uranus-Pluto dates, January 15th and 20th, Sun will be moving over the U.S. Capricorn, shining light of day on that Plutocrat energy, really having people looking at, are we a republic or a democracy? Republic is representation, not direct democracy. And that could be an issue that starts to come up with all the voting issues rights and how conservatives have, as we call it, gerrymandered the districts to make it so easy for Republicans to be elected over Democrats. Saturn in Sagittarius, I'll talk more on this in my Saturn in Sag series I have coming up in January. But as you can see, over the next couple of years, Saturn in Sag is going to oppose the U.S. Uranus in Gemini and Mars in Gemini. So there's going to be a lot more truth versus lies exposed, all kinds of levels, be it belief systems, be it sexual scandals, be it social movements, be it, cybersecurity. It'll just cover everything. Planets in the second house here in the U.S. chart, it can start to cover all of our financial and monetary issues. The belief behind the U.S. Gemini chart is that most of your founding fathers who signed the Declaration of Independence were what we called Freemasons. And back in those days, the Freemasons had knowledge of astrology. And the belief is that they'd have their meetings in Philadelphia, and then Liberty Hall or whatever it was called, and then they go to the pubs. And that's where you had your food and your, beer or malts or whatever they were at that time. But anyway, they go there. And so there's this belief that they hashed it all out into the evening one day, one night. Okay? And of course, these three planets, again, 1700s, they didn't know about Pluto. They didn't know about Pluto. They didn't know about Neptune. They probably didn't know about Uranus. Wasn't Uranus the 1780s? I don't think they knew about Uranus yet. So they wanted to put the wealth in the second house. Nothing stronger than Sun, Jupiter, Venus conjunctions for prosperity. And here they are in the second house. So that's the history behind the Gemini chart as a US chart. Here are the dates that Uranus and Pluto, again, Pluto oppositions to the Sun, Pluto squares, waxing squares to Saturn, Uranus oppositions to Saturn, Uranus last quarter squares to the Sun. Here are the dates. Pluto in red, Uranus in black. You can see we've went through most of them with 2014. We've gotten through those. We have one more coming up this week. And here are the ones in 2015. So you can see these are still going to be active. We've had Pluto opposing the US Sun 3 times this year. And again, the people versus the plutocrats. And your waxing squares, Pluto with the waxing squares to Saturn in Libra. Fairness for us all, or the plutocrats running away while giving us lip service. Uranus having these oppositions to Saturn, same thing, exposing what's good for the individual versus the groups, the whole libertarian thing, really breaking, opening up exposures, all kinds of exposures to how the US, Saturn, and Libra, the laws seem to be fair and equal, and they are not. And when you are looking at, for instance, the Uranus Pluto waxing squares, and you're looking at slower moving planets having impact to personal natal planets, especially when it's mundane astrology and you're talking about, say, the natal planets of a country. It's not always the exact date. It can be many times. There is a lag effect of the consensus waking up to what might have taken place during the dates. And so Saturn in Sag, we may see again that anything goes banking environment come back like it did with Pluto in Sag for a couple of years, and more of the high stakes gambling. And Pluto or Saturn will go into Capricorn and boom bang, repeat it all over again. So when we look at Pluto making the oppositions to the Sun, first quarter squares to Saturn, you can see we've been speaking on all these issues. They're coming up left and right, and the question becomes, which one of them is a social moment? Which ones become social movements? Which one take on lives of their own? Gender issues, social, racial, financial issues, constitutional, healthcare, climate issues. We all see this stuff up in arms for all of us. And first quarter squares, Pluto to Saturn, breakthroughs, new directions, or more polarization, and trying to go back to the old ways, the 1%, the plutocrats. It's very similar with Uranus hits to the US chart. The last quarter squares are the crises in consciousness. What no longer works? What are the people recognizing on a collective level? I just listed a few, but you can go back to the Pluto page and it includes all of them. But you can start to see, the minimum wage movements. Look at how well they did in the US in our elections. Look at how they tried to pull the public bank or the private banking and gutting the banking laws that we created in 2010 after the 2008 crises. We just gutted them again. So we've talked about many of this stuff. oppositions to Saturn, the polarizations, the standoffs? Or are we going to make those structural changes and evolve our groups going forward? That is my material for tonight. Here are future classes for everybody. As you reflect upon all of this, I think you can perhaps see that we are in the midst of major change on planet Earth, regardless of the issue or the subject. You may perhaps be able to recognize that you yourself, on a very personal, intimate level, are in the midst of major personal changes. Where do you feel insecure, clinging to the past? Where do you need to find the courage? Ask questions, listen, move forward to move out of that past and into your future. Uranus conjunct that south node. It is going to be waking each of us up on a very personal, individual basis. It too will push those buttons of insecurity. It too requires us to find that courage to break free from the past and move forward. And of course, then together, all of us are having to reach these choice points where we decide, how are we going to be active on planet Earth as we make these major breakthroughs on the most personal levels within ourselves and our relationships? How are we going to choose to be a part of changes moving forward on planet Earth? Any questions from anybody? Comments? Questions? Leroy, even you were silent tonight. Or maybe the board was busy. I don't. Any
No, it
comments or
was
questions from Leroy?
it was a little too quiet on the board. Actually, I was a little multitasker tonight, but a lot of information, good information. You covered it very well, and people are thanking you as we speak.
All right. All right, everyone. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of insight into your own life and into how you want to be a part of change personally and collectively on planet Earth. And on behalf of Leroy and myself, we wish you all the best with all of those changes. So thank you very much. And unless I do have final call for any comments or questions. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And again,